نحمده ونصلي على رسول الكريم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Sounds like we need some organs to be donated to the musallis of Masjid Umar. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. That's better, mashallah, we got our vocal cords in order. I've been asked to share a few words with you with regards to the up and coming opt out or stay in with regards to organs and organ donation. I won't keep it too long, I'll keep it relatively short. Just a bit of water just to get the dryness gone, inshallah. Let me start by setting out some principles. The principles that we have are that we may seek medicinal intervention when there is something wrong with our body. It is not binding, it is not necessary. Why, you might ask? The reason being is, apart from, say, food and water, and maybe some kind of physical operation with a broken bone or something of that nature, there is no guarantee that any type of medicinal intervention we take will bring about the result of saving our life. If we opt not to drink water or to eat food, then there is a guarantee that that person will die. So we can't bring about our own death. So we have to consume food and we have to drink water. But when it comes to medicinal intervention, there is no guarantee. For example, we know that the flu virus always pops around winter time. But it doesn't mean that every single one of us will contract flu. Some of us will, some of us won't. So we see a similar hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ mentions about contagious diseases, in which a camel has a rash. And the Sahabi is asking, should the camel be separated from the other camels? And the Prophet of Allah ﷺ said, well, what gave the rash to the first camel? So, obviously we do take science into consideration. It's not that we're blind to science and we don't acknowledge science. And whatever scientific developments take place, whatever medicinal developments take place, we take those into consideration. But our Sharia is our first and foremost principle, because it is that which we are measured against in terms of what we are doing right and what we are doing wrong, what we will be rewarded for and what we will be punished for. And at the end of the day, that is the purpose of life. So medicinal intervention we've already spoke about, where that needs to be taken into place. The body we have, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created it in this way. So if I was to now decide to chop my finger off, then this would be a form of harming myself. This would be a form of mutilating part of my body. If I was to decide to chop my ear, or if I was to decide to do something else to my body, then all this would be considered as causing harm and mutilating my body. Even things as simple as a lady shaving all her head, or making gaps in her teeth, or the male shaving his beard completely, all these also come under the definition of mutilation, because we are supposed to keep that characteristic. However, in some cases, that mutilation may be overridden. So God forbid if somebody gets cancer, or if you have a problem with some liver disease or something of that nature, or something which can be removed from the body, you have gangrene in the foot, then the doctors, the surgeons may say that we have to carry out an amputation. Or you've broken some ribs, or there's some internal damage in which the surgeon will have to cut your body open in order to access the inner part of your body. The question would arise, surely this is also mutilation. But the reason why that mutilation is being done is because in that case it is the lesser harm to remove the greater harm from your body. Not from somebody else's, from your own body. That the cut has to be made. If the cut is not made, then the surgeon cannot access whatever it is, some abscess, some growth, So he has to cut you. That is mutilation. But in order to do that, similar, for example, if a cesarean section has to be carried out during birth, there is a natural way for birth, and in some cases a cesarean section has to be carried out, which is mutilation. The cut is being made, but in order to access the child. In some cases we also see where a woman dies. The fuqaha speak about this in the books of fiqh, that a woman dies but she's still carrying child. Now the woman is dead, the child is still alive. So the mutilation where the woman will be cut in order to access the child. Remember, cesarean sections did not exist in times gone by. This is a more recent medicinal development. So this did not exist, so there was no such thing as a cesarean section in those days, but they would carry them out on dead women if during childbirth there were complications and the mother died and they could not access the unborn child. So the unborn child is still alive, whereas the woman is dead. So in those circumstances, that child would be removed by cutting, mutilating the female body. So mutilation is something which is highly regarded, or in the sense it's treated very importantly. تغير خلق الله. It's the changing of the creation of Allah. And even in Surah Baqarah, if I'm not mistaken, it mentions the way the ears of animals were slit and things of that nature. And these are minor changes, these little slits, little cuts. In fact, there is a Khabl Wahid which supports that the camel, the garlanded camel which is being taken for slaughter for Hajj, should be cut. The hump should be cut, and then the blood should be smeared over the hump of the animal, so people know that this animal should not be rode upon, or this animal should not be milked, or this animal should not be taken benefit from, because this is solely for the sake of Allah, and it will be taken to the haram and it will be slaughtered there. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala disagrees with that, because his usul is that he does not take a single khabr al-wahid. He looks at the whole body of ahadith and he says this would constitute mutilation, and the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was against mutilation to such an extent where if two people were riding an animal, a separate animal each, that they should not sit on the animal and talk to each other. They should dismount, they should remove the saddle, because animals have rights as well. So he did not, because he was looking at the whole body of a hadith, he felt that. So you can see these are what we would consider to be minor things, yet this is coming under the broad umbrella of mutilation. So next we look at the human body. The human body itself. Does the Sharia permit for the human body, a live, healthy human, to have his body cut in order to access his organs? Now, if we have organs, say like kidneys, then it is known that a human can survive on one kidney if that kidney is removed. But he has no guarantee that in 3 months or 6 months down the road, he's going to contract an illness in which he now can't survive with one kidney. There is a reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed 2 kidneys there. So by taking that step, he's putting him. So under his ruling is mutilation. But I want to leave that discussion for now. I want to take the discussion onto what is referred to as the majority of organ harvesting, or the majority of organ retrieval, is when the human is dead. And I say dead with little speech marks. There is something called the dead donor rule, and this was brought about by the medical profession to ensure that organs are not retrieved from humans that are alive. The organs are only retrieved from humans that are dead. But this is somewhat of a paradox. Reason being is that if the human is dead, then his organs are dead. And if his organs are dead, then his organs are of no use. Because there is something called ischemia. And if ischemia takes place, then those organs are of no use whatsoever to another human. How did the Sharia define death, or how do we define death? The Sharia defines death as the separation of the soul from the body. So when we were in our mother's womb, prior to the soul being blown in, we were a part of our mother. Like she had a hand, like she had a foot, like she had an ear, she had this other growth inside her womb. When a soul was blown in, then we had our own identity. We were another human now. We had rights. Before it was her body, And I know there's a much debate and discussion going on, particularly in the States and coming across into Ireland as well, or Northern Ireland in particular, about abortions and who has a right on the abortion, and at what stage is abortion permissible and impermissible, or from a moral perspective, ethically, when is it right to carry out an abortion. Now, we draw that distinction, but that does not mean that a woman can mutilate herself by removing a part of her body, because that is part of her body. So once the soul is blown in, then this is a human now. This person is a human. So if this person, so this dead donor rule has been established to ensure that organs are only retrieved from dead people. But we have this paradox where if we retrieve these organs from a dead person, then ischemia has already taken place and this person is dying. And how do we determine when the soul separates from the human? How do we measure that? Now that's a metaphysical act. How the soul is connected to us, the hadith explain that the soul joining the human body is easy. It's blown in. This seems like a gentle, soft action. But when it's extracted, it's pulled out. Okay, it's pulled out. As gentle as possible for the pious people, and the person feels as the soul is leaving from his feet through his legs, and then his eyes usually follow it as it's extracted from him. Why? Because obviously the soul is connecting itself to the human, the dunya, the longer it stays here. It has an affinity for this world. It doesn't want to separate from it. We have that both psychologically and physically. We get used to this world. How many of us are ready now to leave this world? Yet, if that same question was asked if we had the mental capacity, if that question was asked a month or a week into our life, we would have all put our hands up. It's similar to you move into a new house, and I said to you, would you like to go back to your old house? 9 out of 10, we would have all put our hands up and say, yeah, I'd like to go back to my old house. But you stay in that house for 6 months, you stay in the house for 5 years, you stay in the house for 10 years. Now I ask the question, how many would you like? Now you're quite happy there, you've had memories there, you've built up a life there. So you're now happy to stay. So similarly, we become happy to stay here, even though we are promised of gardens of Jannah, we're promised all these things, yet we choose this dunya. We prefer this dunya. So the Sharia defines it by elasticity of the skin, the sort of depression of the temples, the nostrils sort of dipping in, the skin changing. Normally humans weren't buried immediately after they died. Once it was perceived that this person had died, then obviously by the time ghusl was taking place, obviously the body is getting colder and colder. You can quite easily tell that this human is now dead. And then this person was buried. But we have this paradox that we need his organs to be alive, but we need him to be dead. Okay, how are we going to cross this? So you might say, why are we even entertaining this? Because there is a huge demand, and I'll use this word, market for human organs. In unfortunate lands, in Far Asia, and even places where we probably originate from, organs are sold and bought. Poor people will sell their organs to rich people. This is the way the world goes. And there's a market for it. And similarly, there is a market for it here. Obviously, you can't sell it, but there's a market for it. People don't want to die. Okay, people don't want to die. Nobody wants to die. People want to live longer and live longer. So we want organs. We need to get the organs from humans. Morally, it just doesn't feel right to take them from living humans. Otherwise, we'd just go to prisoners and just execute them and take the organs from them and nobody would care. We need the organs to be alive. Can't take them from living people because that's murder. So we have to take them from dead people, but we can't take them from dead people because organs are dead. So we're stuck. So it was realized very early on that living humans their organs were being retrieved. So a dead donor rule was put together to ensure that doesn't happen. However, even the dead donor rule is unfortunately not followed to the letter. The reason being is exactly what I've said. two ways currently death is determined: cardiopulmonary death or brainstem death. Okay, well, our heart beats, we breathe. You can tell we're alive because we have a pulse, and if we place a hand under our nose, you can feel air on your finger, so you know this human is alive. But some, because now we have the development of the artificial ventilation, which didn't exist before, so once you stop breathing, once your heart stopped beating, apart from some poor person doing CPR on you for the rest of your life, you had died. That's it, it was over. And within time, because of the lack of oxygen going to your brain died. Once your brain died, then obviously the rest of your body died, and that's it, you were put. But now we have artificial ventilation, which can keep our bodies alive. So there needed to be some other form of determining death. So then this, what's called brainstem death, came about, to determine death using brainstem death. But even using brainstem death, and I can't quote all the necessary material to you, you'll find I've written a detailed research fatwa on this. So if you Google it, search it online, you should find it, inshallah. If not, it's on our Telegram channel. And maybe if Usman just forwards it on the Facebook page or something like that, inshallah. So you'll see that certain aspects of the human continue even though he is brain dead. Okay, certain things continue, which would mean that he's still a live person. A woman has given birth while she was supposedly brain dead. So therefore it's clear we can see that there is no, at the moment, real understanding of when death is occurring. Therefore, to promote the taking of organs from a human who's potentially dying for something which is not wajib, which is not fard, to seek cure in this way is not fard, bar the fact that we want to live longer, cannot be justified. It cannot be justified. And morally, as a community, we need to stand for that. I appreciate if we make the emotional argument, if one of us sat here now had a daughter or a son that needed an organ, then we would be emotionally engaged with it. It would be very different. We'd even justify, I guess, if one of our children ended up going to, say, prison, we would disagree with long sentences. You know, when you're in that situation, it's human nature. You can't see straight. You're emotionally engaged with the process. It's too difficult. That's why they bring doctors in whenever they're kind of making decisions. It's not necessarily always the doctors who are providing the care to the patient. They try to get external doctors in as well to also get second opinion, third opinion. Why? Because they're separate. They're not emotionally engaged with the process. So when I'm consulted and other ulama are consulted about switching ventilation machines off for individuals who have been declared brain dead and there's no chance of recovery or things of that nature, then a decision has to be made there. Now, in England anyway, by spring 2020, if I'm not mistaken, there will be, because now before it used to be you opted in, you chose to be a donor, you will have to opt out in order not to be a donor. They've changed it around because I think people are just a little bit lazy and they just choose not to donate, whereas now they will have to take an actual stand by choosing not to donate. Now, even if a person doesn't go ahead, they should go ahead if they, from an Islamic perspective, but if they say they choose not to, then as long as they've let their family members know, they cannot retrieve organs unless the family has given the nod. So if the family know that my father, mother, brother were against this, they did not want their organs to be retrieved, then they can also make that point. We obviously need to look into it, read about it. This is something which will take place, as I said, spring 2020. We need to understand the process. We need to understand what we're doing. For us as Muslims, it's a bigger picture for us. We accept death, We're not morbid in that, where we think of death and whatever, but we are told that this is just a journey, that this life is just a part of that journey. It is not the life. But when we get detached from the hereafter, when we sort of lose that, then we unfortunately, our focus goes on to this state of mind. I'm not even going to go into the medication which is required for the person even when he takes the organ, because the body could refuse it as a foreign object. When the body refuses it as a foreign object, because obviously you put something else inside your body, So when he refuses it, it's going to disconnect from it. So you've got to take medication for the rest of life. There's no guarantee that that will give you a better quality of life. There's no guarantee that it will extend the duration of your life. It's all a guessing game, really, and all the pain that you have to go through and all the difficulty that one has to go through during the process. So we're not even talking about, I'm moving away now from the Sharia perspective. So these are important factors that need to be taken into consideration. We know why the NHS will push for something of this nature, obviously, because the demand is incredibly high. People are queuing up for donors. And because we tend not to get donors from, say, the BAME, the black and ethnic minority groups, then there's a greater demand for donors from those groups. So there will be that demand there. But we have to take a broader understand what our purpose here is, what we're trying to achieve. We understand what illnesses are there for. Illnesses are also a means for us to reflect the time when we were healthy. It is for the rest of us to look and think, Alhamdulillah, that I have the ability to walk, this brother can't walk. Alhamdulillah, I have the ability to see, this brother can't see. So we recognize the ni'mats which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. It's also a means of removing the sins that we've generated, which unfortunately we've not sought repentance for, which we've not given kafara for. So it's a means of removing that from us. And it's something that we should accept. There are, as I mentioned, legal ways, and even in certain cases, what are considered as tadawi bil haram, where there are illegal ingredients that the Sharia permits its use. Once it has been proven that that will bring about this person's health or recovery. But that's when it involves not bring death to another person in the process, because now you are acting like God and you are saying that this person's life is of less value than this person's life. So then it becomes a moral argument. Should an organ donation take place to a person who's a serial rapist? Should it or shouldn't it? No, it shouldn't. Why shouldn't it? Because he's human, he might make tawbah. So he should get it. No, he shouldn't get it because he's a serial rapist. He's going to carry on raping more. No, but so now we're entering into what should be left to Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides when life should be given. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides when death should be given. So legitimate ways, we are, as I mentioned to you, Sharia has given permissibility, legitimate ways, and there are many legitimate ways. But this is a process, because I've not gone into the more greater details, and obviously we've gone up to 20 odd minutes, is that the chemicals which are added to the person who's dying in order to make sure his organs are fresh, that also brings about the death of the person. The resuscitation, where the individual will not be resuscitated because you need his organs. And if you were to resuscitate him, then obviously he will be alive. But the family have accepted his death. So let him die. There's another family who's wanting his organs. A young 15-year-old. This chap is 75. He's got no family members. Nobody's really going to miss him. He's dying anyway. It's only a matter of time. We could potentially save a person's life. So once we start making these kind of decisions, then it becomes problematic. So I hope that without being too technical, I've managed to, I don't know if I've managed to, I've tried to explain a complicated subject and hopefully bring about better awareness. So when a decision is made, then that decision is based on understanding one's fiqh and understanding the Sharia perspective as well. Jazakumullah khair. Any simple questions? Nothing technical, please. It's been a long day.
So is it haram to donate your organs?
That's a strong word. If a person is if currently the method that's being used, where a person has to be treated and a person's organs have to be kept alive, and it's got to be done in such a way that it is speedily taken and all that process, and that brings about the death of the person, then yes, it would be. So there's no doubt about that.
So are we saying that donation of the donors is not permitted by Islam, because the person who science says is dead is not actually dead?
That's correct.
Okay, so
yeah, because you have to add chemicals to his body in order to make sure that his organs are still ready for harvesting.
All right. So if the person is dead, medically as well,
yeah,
whether then after that.
So then that opens another can of worms as well.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting point, because I've obviously stopped at the point of dying. Well, firstly, the problem would be is those organs would be of no use.
That's the second question. But whether then is permissible by Islam.
That's what I was going to go to next. So first of all, it would be that they're not of no use whatsoever. Secondly, would it permit the cutting of a human in that case?
Yeah.
Well, that again would come under mutilation, which was the point I was making right at the beginning, where the mutilation carried out. So if, say, a person had swallowed a £1 million diamond, and the owner said, I want that diamond back, and there was no way of retrieving, they could wait, they could bury him and wait for him to decompose and collect it, but that person says, no, it's my right, I want that diamond. Then the hukumat, whatever the judicial powers are, they can carry out an autopsy and retrieve it. And I'm glad I mentioned autopsy, because we are somewhat a strange community, because we have argued against the NHS to invest in non-invasive autopsies, because we say it's haram to cut the human body. We say to carry out an autopsy is impermissible. We want a non-invasive. We want to put him in like a scanner, and the scanner will do a full body scan and they'll give it. In fact, we kick up a fuss when they hold our bodies back and they say, sorry, no, he died under suspicious circumstances, we need to carry out an autopsy. We say, you can't do that, it's against our Sharia. Why? Because they're cutting the body. So we find that mutilation. So how do we find that mutilation and not in this case where the exactly same
But
things?
you mentioned some mutilations are permitted. For example, Allah has given us 2 kidneys.
Yeah.
So one kidney can save another person's life.
It could potentially save
So
another,
then
but this is it.
mutilation is authorized.
But can we make that decision? Can we, as Muslims, make that decision that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me 2, which means that I can give another one away to somebody else? That this is something that I can just give away as something I can choose to do so because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave 2. It could be that that person 6 years down the road suffers from some kidney breakdown and now he needs the other kidney, but he doesn't have it anymore. So it's this whole thing of we have, as time has gone on, wanting to become independent from Allah. So, for example, we have insurance. And one of the reasons for insurance is so tawakkul Allah goes. If your house is insured, would you care if you leave your front door open or not? Are you going to pray Ayatul Kursi or not? Well, you don't care because someone breaks in, insurance is going to pay out. Next time you get into your car, are you going to read the dua for a safe journey? Well, it doesn't really matter because if I crash, I'll get twice as better car. So what insurance does is it removes the tawakkul upon Allah. So similarly, when it comes to medicinal developments, we want to decide, and this is why they say about babies, I forgot the term, where you can design a babies, that's the phrase, where you can design your own baby. They can manipulate DNA. Yeah, and you can now start picking that I want my child to be 6 foot, I want him to have blue eyes, I want him to be clever, whatever. So is that medical development, or is that us now trying to become our own gods? So we also, not only should we look at the biological aspects, we should also look at the philosophical aspects that are going on as well. And in a way, we're trying to kill God, so that Allah plays no role whatsoever. We decide all matters, we decide all things, we decide when we want to be born and how we want to be born and what we should look like, who we should marry, who we should love, and all these things. And this is just the humanistic kind of way we're going about it. In fact, this is not too different than the sort of Nazis' eugenics approach, because they had dismissed God completely from the equation and they wanted to make the perfect human. So by making the perfect human, you had to be 6 foot, blonde, blue eyes, certain size, certain IQ, whatever, and they wouldn't allow, black-haired, small people, or Jewish people, or whatever, ill people, handicapped people, or whatever. They wanted to kind of remove them from society so that they would have this perfect race of people. So that shows when science does not have the moral control, which doesn't necessarily have to be, for us it's Sharia-based, but for others it might be Christian, Judaic, whatever. If it doesn't have that, then science uncontrolled can become easily a vicious beast, because it's a tool. And depending on who's using it, then it can be used in the wrong way, as it can be used in a good way. I don't think anybody agrees that nuclear weapons was a bright idea. A weapon that can destroy half the planet probably wasn't really thought through very well, because that's just, why would you want to do that for? So, but it's science. Nuclear fission was a fantastic thing. Energy was being produced. So we have to look at not just because sometimes what we do is we become very sort of piecemeal. When we look at the Sharia and how the Sharia should be applied, it's a holistic approach. You have to look at things in a total way. Not just this, but what is this having an effect on the person's mind? We're told that even when you take an aspirin, you shouldn't think that aspirin is making you better. If you do that, you have a aqeedah problem. It's Allah's making you better. So, and this has been sort of proven from, science has shown that the placebo effect, where you can give a completely dud tablet and that person thinks he's getting better. Where he thinks, I feel much better now, and you think, no, you idiot, you've just been eating sawdust. So our aqeedah always is Allah is making better.
Brother, what you just said, I think maybe a misunderstanding can come from that. Allah has given 2 kidneys. So basically, 1 kidney you need, 1 kidney you need. Your choice to give away. But is it your choice to?
No, it's not. It's not. That's another debate in itself of do we have ownership rights over the human body? That's another debate in itself. Is this mine? Am I malik of this? And like I can, I wasn't going to smash that, but like I can smash this phone, can anybody in this masjid say to me, you can't do that? No one can, because I'm malik of that. So this is another thing, is this body ours under the milkiyat ownership, or is this an amana? And then trust me.
Going further down, what do we say about donating blood?
Blood is a replenishable matter which can be replaced.
That same rule applies to the liver.
That same rule does apply to liver, absolutely. So the liver would be, but the problem with liver is how are you going to access the liver? You're going to cause a cut to the person, you're going to go inside the person, you're going to cause harm to the person. Whereas with blood, you're not going to cause harm to the person. If there was harm being caused to the person, then you should not give blood.
But that harm is to save the bigger harm.
Yes, I'm
sorry. Yes. I was going to ask about the liver, because you could do liver resection, you are using laparoscopic techniques, so you make a very, very small hole there, and the surgery only takes about an hour, and you only sort of remove a very, very small portion of the liver, and the liver grows back in sort of 6 weeks.
If there were processes which did not bring about harm to the human, and it did not cause about mutilation, then even though you're talking about the liver there, which is an organ, a physical organ, it's not something which, it takes longer to replenish, then there is some scope for accepting that. Like the way, for example, human milk was given. So, for example, in the days gone by, what they would do is their children would be given to women who lived on the outskirts of Mecca, because a Meccan life was a bit hustle-bustle, a bit like London, and the outside countryside was nice and calm. The dialect of Arabic was very fasih. Also, the air was very fresh. The milk was very good. The water was very good. So people would give their children, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was also given, to be fed by women who would live on the outskirts. Now, there was no way of removing milk from a woman's breast in those days. There is now. So nowadays, a woman can remove milk and then tell her husband to feed the child in his shift, if he has a shift. But before that was not possible. And milk is also something which is replenishable. So when a woman feeds a child milk, obviously this is not even her own child. Her own child, obviously there will be some level of responsibility. But when she feeds a child milk, her milk will be produced again, and then she can continue to do so. And the blood is in a similar sort of vein to that. Similar sort of vein to that. Sorry for the pun. Gee.
I think two important points, mashallah, is one is tawakkul ala Allah, and two is who has malkiyat on our body. Obviously, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has malkiyat over our body. So as you said, these decisions are out of our hands anyway. And also, the fact that we have to have tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah, this is, I'm glad and it's worth revisiting this. This is the actual cornerstone of our deen, is to trust Allah. And, things like insurances, things like, CCTV, things like, burglar alarms, they're all fantastic. We all have them. But what they do is they slowly break the connection between us and Allah, because we stop trusting Him. We start trusting the CCTV, you know, or we won't get a break. Have you ever heard anyone say, well, we won't get a break-in because Allah will protect us? We won't get a break-in because we've got CCTV. So the sabab now is, you know, we're looking at these things, material things, which then replaces, and that's why, you know, we feel really awkward talking to Allah, because we're not talking to Him as often. Before we'd be talking to Allah when we leave our car somewhere, we would be talking to Allah when we leave our house, we'd be talking to Allah when we send our children out, we'd be talking to Allah, you know, every little step we'd be talking to Allah. So we'd have a very close bond with Him, a very close relationship with Him. But we've been slowly, through the kind of humanistic, materialistic way, replacing Him through lots of different means, until eventually we've made Him redundant in our lives. That doesn't mean Allah is dead. Allah is there. He's Al-Hayy, He's living, Al-Qayyum. He will always be there. Unfortunately, in our hearts, He no longer exists. And then that starts to sow the seed of nifaq, which then starts to sow the seeds of kufr, until eventually, you know, na'udhu billahi min zalik, we are so far away that we don't even recognize that, you know, that's understanding. G.
So I want to spin the question the other way around. So if I was told by the doctor that a certain part of my organ has stopped functioning, can I accept a non-Muslim's organ into my body because they don't believe in the whole mutilation, etc., etc.?
There is a separate argument along those very same lines, and the ulama have mentioned that being permissible in that route. This, however, then opens the door of, you know, hypocrisy, and then this is where you find, particularly, you know, living in societies that we live in, that, hold on, Muslims are okay to take things, but they're not too chuffed when it comes to giving things. Okay, so, you know, that's another area. So remember, we can give a fiqh answer, but we shouldn't always give a fiqh answer. We should give a fiqh answer, but then a philosophical and theological answer, all linked together. Unfortunately, because, you know, we just get kanz al-daqaiq, we just open a book of fiqh and just give an answer, it's very empty. We have to give a whole. You see, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam built a whole kind of atmosphere, a whole society, a whole way of thinking. So even though when he spoke and said things, there was a way of thinking that everybody had. Unfortunately, because we are so far away from that, we have to remind ourselves each time. So whenever we speak of some fiqh matter, we have to you know, place it within a philosophy. Like we've talked about tawakkul Allah, you know, what's that got to do with organ transplantation? You know, do you get what I mean? But it's important that we address these sort of topics and mention them in that context, so we understand things better. Like insurance, we'll say, oh, you can't do insurance because it's riba. But yeah, but have we not thought about the trust aspect that we just spoke about earlier? That's also fundamental, because that's your aqidah. That's your aqidah is more important than fiqh.
So should we be opting out?
This man's a very naughty boy.
These questions are going to come up.
They're going to come up. You're asking for my opinion on it?
Yeah.
Yes, you should opt out.
I've opted out.
Yeah, he opted out today. So yes, you should opt out, obviously, because of what is. Inshallah ta'ala, you see, this is what I was speaking to some colleagues the other day. The problem with us as Muslims is we just Islamify what's already there. So we see something and we say, oh, is that halal or haram? That's halal or that's haram. You see, we should be leaders when it comes to moral issues, okay? So we should have been the first ones to say organ transplantation is morally wrong. So what would that have done? Well, what that would have done is the scientists would have developed an alternative. Now they are developing an alternative. Now they're looking at, because now they're seeing it morally being a bit not right. So now they're developing, okay, I appreciate they're working on pigs and things like that, but they're developing where in a laboratory using cells, human cells, you can make an ear. So they're growing ears on the back of mice. You can grow a heart, you can grow a kidney, you can grow a lung. And then if you use the human's own cells, it won't reject it, because it's his own cells. Now, had that been objected, because this is organ transplant, you're talking 50s and 60s, and science was very different, medicine, the ethical elements of medicine was very different then. But the Muslim community, instead of sort of saying, oh, hold on, we disagree with it, you just said, okay, ye halal, ye haram, you know, we just looked at it like that, ye halal, chalo gunjaish hai zaroor, that's it. And we've just gone with the crowd, when we were supposed to be leaders. This ummah was made to be leaders. We become followers. And once you become a follower, your voice is no longer any use. So when people say, oh, what's the Muslim's voice on this? Who cares? They're just going to say what everybody else is saying. And we have a high position when it comes to ethics and morals. Because we are the ones who still have the book, which has not been molested by man. So because we still have that book, we have a direct connection with Allah. So we have that within our books, we have that within our hadith. But unfortunately, we've abandoned it because of our inferiority complex. We see people with lab coats and pens in their lab coats, and we think, wow, and they must be right. And we just go with the crowd, and we should have objected to it right from the beginning, said this is wrong, this is morally wrong. We didn't have to bring Sharia into it. This is morally wrong. We need an alternative. Look for an alternative. And they would have developed, they're developing it now. So I think within 20, 30 years of this kind of conversation will be redundant anyway, because they'll be manufactured within laboratories.
Right, just to clarify, so when they do the organ harvesting, medically and technically and in terms of Sharia, that person is still alive because, as you said, the organs need to be taken when the person is alive.
So when I was invited to a session in Birmingham with the leading experts in brain death, and they read my paper, and I put this question in black and white to them because and they said absolutely true. It's a moral decision, not a medicinal decision. They're saying it as it is. It's a moral decision. Morally, society has accepted that this person is going to die. He's 5 hours away from death, an hour, a day away from death, 5 days away from death. He's 70 odd or whatever, or he's brain damaged. He's just been in an accident on a bike. He's brain damaged. And they make a moral decision. It's not a medical decision. It's a moral decision. So if it's a moral decision, what should dictate morals to us? Islam. That's where we get our morals from. We don't make.
We had a Musalli, everyone knows it probably. He used to live in the front of Battisa. Very here in the front, he had patches. I was called to the hospital, this is 2 years ago I'm talking about. He's just passed away now. And the family were there, basically arguing that the hospital was saying turn the machine off and he'll be dead in 10 minutes. We'll do whatever you want, turn him towards the Qibla, this, that and the other. And one brother was against it, no. So I was brought in as, so I went in there, I said, listen, okay, turn the machine off. It's not necessary that the person will die. Death will only come if Allah has willed death for him. But the surgeon was so certain that that man was going to die within 10 minutes, guaranteed death. He lived for another 2 years. They took the machine off and he started breathing. 2 years.
And that's a very good example, Jazakum khair for sharing that. That just kind of epitomizes what I'm saying here.
And even adoption, abortion. Somebody came to me, he's a Musalli of mine. I think about 7 months down the line, the doctor said that the baby inside is deformed and whatever. And they were saying that do abortion because it's going to cause this problem, that problem. And I said, no, it's not permissible for you. The boy, he's alive and alhamdulillah, perfectly normal baby. The guy, whenever he sees me so much respect.
So you saved my life.
You saved my son's life. But this is what they wanted.
Just on that point, just keep that thought in mind, is that when that question comes to me about abortion, even when it's 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, I ask the person, I said, do you have a son or daughter? And the person said, yes, I have a son. What's his name? His name is Ali. I said, okay. I said, how old is Ali? I personalize, add a bit of emotion to it. I said, how old is Ali? Ali is 9 years old. How is Ali? Does he play football? And I make him talk. And he says, yeah, he's doing well at school and whatever. I said, okay. I said, imagine Ali was deformed, I said. And he goes, okay. I said, now what I want you to do is I want you to go kill him. He goes, never. I will never kill Ali. I said, why? He's deformed. Yeah, because Ali is my son. I said, so what is wrong with the one that isn't born yet? Just because he's not born, he has no rights. Just because this one is born, he has rights. It's just we become emotionally attached to people, and at the moment we're not emotionally attached to this person because he's not born. Whereas Ali, we've seen him grow, we've seen him play, we've seen him fall down, he's gone to school, his first tooth came out, we've seen the whole thing, we've got the pictures and the selfies and everything. And now, obviously, this child, we don't even know, it doesn't have a name, it's just, forget about it, can't go on abortion, who's going to look after a deformed child, it's going to be a full-time job for you, and it's going to be a full-time job for me. But we wouldn't do that if it was a child we already knew. So we've got to try to understand things. Just because they don't connect in our mind, if we look at things more broader, then we'll start to appreciate what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the Sharia is not necessarily that everybody understands it. Even some parts of the Sharia, the ulama don't understand it. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not want to declare it. Sometimes the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would explain the rationale behind something, sometimes he wouldn't. Sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains the rationale behind something, sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes it might be because it's beyond our capacity, it might be because we won't appreciate it, whatever the reason is. We are here to worship Allah, and that's what we're here for. And we've got to try to gain more of that. Gee, brother.
Just a different scenario. What if the government passes a legislation and makes it compulsory to donate organs, like home insurance, car insurance?
When it becomes a compulsory aspect, this is a whole topic which we'll probably carry on for another hour, is that if you have a law which is what you would consider law of the land, and if you have a law which is a law of the Sharia, how and where do you try to meet the two in the middle? So for example, if you went through a red light, is that also haram, as well as 3 points or 6 points on your license? Or is that, so I think we would, to really appreciate that, you would need me to explain in more detail. But you can see for the examples you gave that some out of necessity have been permitted. You've talked about car insurance, you say, sorry? So the basic level of car insurance has been permitted by ulama for that very reason, in order to permit the use of your own vehicle, because it's your car. You own your car, but the state won't let you drive it on their roads. So you own the car, it's your car, right? So you bought the car, you've got the car, it's in your driveway. But the state's saying, so you can't use our roads. Now the state can't do that, shouldn't do that. Okay, they can charge road tax for the use of but they're saying whatever the rationale is, obviously people don't pay, we know people commit fraud and whatever, so they say that you've got to have a minimum level of insurance. So the ulama have permitted that for the sake of being able to drive your car. So again, that would be a debate that would be had then, but this is a greater whole concept, which again has not been explored, which should be explored, is that what happens when there's certain laws, are you free from punishment? So if you commit theft and you do 2 years behind bars, is that your sin clear as well? Or is on Yawm al-Qiyamah you're going to be taken to task for that theft? Because the Sharia has a different punishment for theft, and obviously the state has a different punishment for theft. So that's a whole bahas on that whole topic. But good question. Take it, inshallah. Ijazat. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.